First public hearing is on the 2024 budget for our enterprise funds. Mayor Kleiss.
Thank you, Council President Gerger and council members. It's an opportunity to present the enterprise budget, which I did present to you earlier in November. So this is the last opportunity, and then the public hearing will open that up. And this is also the last meeting of 2023. So I want to wish you all happy holidays and Merry Christmas to all of you and to the folks as we close out the last piece of 2023 and the first beginning of 2024, because this is the budget for the enterprise funds. And the enterprise funds are a little different than the budget that we passed at the last council meeting, which is the property tax supported budget. Property tax supported budget is a budget that I have a responsibility to present to you. The charter gives me that responsibility. I bring that in August. You passed that last week. That's for the operating. That is items that are property tax supported in whether it's public safety, whether it's parts of those infrastructure, the parks, those types of things. This budget is different. These are enterprise funds. They're different. They're kind of business type activities. They are paid for by the fees that are generated in each of these entities. There are 9 different enterprise funds that we have. If you look at the on the screen there, water, wastewater, hydro, stormwater, streetlight, utility, refuse. Those top 6 really is the bulk. Those top 6 are 84% of the enterprise funds. And these are the things that everybody, even though you pay as you go, people really can't live without. I mean, this is your water, your sewer, your refuse, the street lights that you have, your storm water. This is 84% of the budget. So, but it's all paid for by fees. So the more you use, the more it costs. And then, of course, the last 3, parking, the municipal athletic complex, and the Rivers Edge Convention Center, those are used for those who use those facilities. Obviously, if you're holding an event at the MAC or if you're going to an event, you're either paying a ticket or you're paying for the rental fees. And the parking system, this is the parking system overall, the downtown parking system that we have. And it's that system that, and especially if in a downtown, if you had any other type of business in the city of St. Cloud, you would be required under our requirements for zoning and those types of things to have parking for your customers and have parking for your employees. Every other place other than downtown. So downtown, because of the density, it'd be really difficult for you to have a place and then have parking for your employees. And every time you leased a facility downtown, it'd be challenging to do. So we have an overall parking system, and that parking system then is paid for by that enterprise fund. So the ramps that we have, the surface lots, and the meters. Parking is always a challenge. It is something that everyone would like to be free. Everyone has an opinion on parking. If it's somebody's parking in your neighborhood or on your street, we get calls on that. If you have guests over, sometimes we get calls on that too if they get a ticket. So it's a tough downtown, that parking enterprise funds challenge, because different types of business use different types of parking. If you're as Councilor Lewis, if you're illegal, folks, you have different clientele than you would if you were coming in on a retail. Retail folks like lots of turnover. Folks that come for an appointment have a set period of time, so they'd prefer not to have to plug the meter. So it's a balance, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But these are the 9 enterprise funds, and each of the budgets going forward here are not property tax supported. In fact, these are all fee generated, with the exception, I do the caveat I use because during COVID, we did have to, like every enterprise funds, it has to be backed up, especially if there's a bond. Our parking system has parking ramps, and we borrow for those, so there are bonds. And when the enterprise funds in COVID, when nobody could use, when everything pretty much shut down, we had to back those revenue bonds with general obligations. So that was the first time that they were done. Now, of course, as we're going forward, those are back to revenue generated from the system itself. The overall budget, $53,036,000. In those, again, those top 6 being the bulk of it, and the bulk of the bulk is really the wastewater, your water utility, and refuse. Those are really your top 3. So those are the areas that have the highest usage and highest costs involved. Again, but they're based on your usage. Again, as you look at, it gives you a little better indication as a pie, is again, the top 6 are 84%, and then those 3 that probably are clearly definition of enterprise, the MAX, the Rivers Edge Convention Center parking system, obviously pay as you go and those types of things, but that's the smallest part of that. Here's just some of the highlights of some of the capital outlay. I think I mentioned this the last time, there are a lot of sexy stuff there, the pump and raw ammonia analyzer replacement, and most of this are things that are extremely important to have, and they don't without this equipment we wouldn't be able to do the water and the sewer and all those things. But there are some things on there you can probably get a better handle of. There's some vehicles, a street sweeper, tandem snowplow, some equipment for refuse trucks and accessories, those types of things. These are really the bulk. One of the largest items in there, though, is the High Banks Stormwater Diversion Project. It's a stormwater utility. You'll see as I start talking about some of these things that we do have a stormwater utility, and that's to protect the river, our greatest natural resource in our communities, the Mississippi River, and to make sure that since your wastewater or our nutrient recovery facility, when you flush your toilet, that's all treated. But when it comes to the actual runoff that you get from rain and from your yard and from the streets, we have a stormwater utility to make sure that we can do everything we can to make sure that water is clean, or then it does go into. And of course, the legislature has done things over the years with phosphorus, the amount of phosphorus and fertilizer and those types of things. But we also have done things with rain gardens. We do the street sweeping for that purpose. We have done some things that tried to capture that rainwater, so it's not all of that flow going into the Mississippi River. So there's a lot of things that we do as part of the stormwater utility, which has been around for a long time. But you'll see in this budget, we're trying to, it's been subsidizing a lot of our construction projects, so we're trying to actually make that we're adding a little bit of additional fee to that because otherwise those projects, and almost every project we do, has a stormwater component to it. Rates itself. So these are the water rates. If you recall the last time I showed you this presentation, there were 2 little asterisks. One was for Sauk Rapids and one was for Waite Park. Those asterisks are gone now. They now have their rate. But you can clearly see, and I mention this each year, this hasn't changed. St. Cloud does have the lowest rates for water and sewer this year and going into next year. With all of the area cities, we are the lowest in that area. That's important. I think it's important to make sure, as we just passed at the last meeting, you passed the overall property tax supported budget, but these are things that are challenging for folks too, water and sewer. A lot of folks, are just hanging in. We've had some pretty rough inflation over the last couple of years, and making sure that these are things that we can control to help keep people in their homes and not have those high costs. And we're very, very conscious of that. As no different than the principle on the property tax supported budget. This isn't my money. We are entrusted with the public's dollars. So it's important that we keep those fees down also. And we've done a pretty good job of that. I think we are leading the region, we are leading the state, we are leading the nation and the world when it comes to nutrient recovery at our wastewater facility, at our water plant. We are in a number of categories, first in the state in a number of things we're doing, and first in the nation, especially in the energy production. And when I showed you that chart where the top 2 things, water and wastewater, back before we started doing the renewables, before we set a goal in 2014 to be 100% renewable, and of course we exceeded that and we actually produce more energy than we use. Our greatest energy user were those 2 facilities, especially the wastewater, the nutrient recovery facility was the greatest use of energy. And in order for us to offset, not only offset those greenhouse gases, again, for the environment, but also to reduce those. I mean, there's 2 natural resources we're trying to protect: the river, our environment, and the resources that you give us and trust us, and that's in your pocketbook. So we focused on reducing those costs, and we've done really well. We set a goal in 2014. We exceeded that goal. It was, in fact, the year hasn't even come yet that we were anticipating the goal to be met, but it was met in 2020. We actually produced more energy than we use. We're a net in both those facilities, but as a citywide. And we've set some other lofty goals. This last year, if you recall from the State of the City, I had set even higher goals for not only at the nutrient recovery plant, but also just in the reducing those energy costs as a whole. But those are why we keep those rates low. If you look at, this is the region, these are all the cities in our area. But if you look at the state, we're in the bottom 10% in the state. So even cities our size, whether it's Rochester, Duluth, or those areas, we still have kept those rates low. Again, because those are challenging costs for folks, but we do it in a way when it's necessary. We look out into the future. That's why we do a capital improvement plan or CIP. One of the things that we look at, what are those needs going to be? What is the growth in our area? We do our wastewater or our nutrient recovery as a region. And we do some things that are, I think also not only in the wastewater where we're producing energy and we're going to be producing hydrogen. We're going to be the first in the world to do that, and actually have an energy source not only for the buildings that we have, but also for the vehicles that we drive. And that's an important piece, not only for the city, but beyond. But it's also important too the treatment. We've done some things that other cities are not doing, and we use a system in our wastewater to use light. And we were the first, I think, to do that. We do that. So there's some things that we're doing that are reducing costs. And we're also very cognizant of making sure that we're ahead of the game because I think folks know is it the PFAB? What is the PFAB? The PFAC. Okay, I got to make sure there's some type of word that I couldn't pronounce or was in there. That is, these are the things that are forever. They don't break down. And so it's a real difficult thing to treat. If you know from this legislative session, where you find most of those chemicals are in groundwater. And a lot of folks have wells in this area and are realizing some pretty significant costs, even in our region, that based on the legislative action, they're going to see that. We're going to be seeing that too. So it's important that, we're ahead of the game when it comes to treating these things and doing things that we need to do. But when it comes to wastewater, do that as a region. When it comes to water, you may see some more collaboration going forward, I think, because of some of those challenges that other cities may be having going forward. You look at this next chart really gives you the water piece, the water usage. That's the blue, again, lower than the other areas. But these other colors are for development. If you look at that orange area, that's for single-family dwelling development or on a cost per home, and then in the gray is on a cost per unit. Even with the development, of course, if you recall last year's discussion, we looked at rate increases. Again, it's one of two ways of doing it. Either you don't do it and you don't have the ability to expand and to grow water and sewer, or you put it on either development or you put it on ratepayers. So it's important to make sure that the burden isn't all on ratepayers. It's one of the reasons we're very cognizant of that. But when there's a need, yes, there needs to be a balance, and that's why you'll see some things as I'm talking about some rates that we're going to do increasing this year, especially in the area of stormwater, refuse, and those types of things. The water and sewer you're not seeing in here, but you're seeing that over a period of time that you've already approved in the previous years. But when it comes to those rates, even with factoring in. This is factoring in. If you recall last year, we had a discussion on this, and I suggested that we hold off a year and then go 25%, 50, and 75. So this next year is the first part of that. That's that 25%. This last year was not, and we did see some development. I assumed that it would probably spark some development if you get those projects in before that rate increase and before the change in how we do on a per unit basis, especially for multi-unit. And so you'll see in a slide coming up that did have an effect. But it is important that we also make sure that we don't pass that on to the ratepayer. And I want to talk a little bit about again this budget here. When it comes to those development fees, that was in last year's action that you took. So we're not adding anything. That was last year. That's over the next 3 years. That action you took last year. I wanted to just correct one thing from the last meeting, because I think there was a discussion about in the general fund budget that there's some, because of those development fees, that would have had an effect on that budget. It did not. It does not in any way. It does not even actually in this budget. for operating costs. So there is no, and the last budget does not have an effect on any of that fee increase. In fact, the fee increase that we talked about for that development, those are actually when we do those developments. So those are the projects, for those of you who are, are very cognizant of that fee increase, you might want to vote against those developments because that's where those fees are. They're not in the operating costs. They're actually in the developments. Now, I think it's important that we have those developments, especially when it comes to housing, because that's our highest demand for any and every employer in our community is workforce housing. How do we create that housing? And that's an important thing. It's important on the area of for development to make sure that we still spur that development, but it's also important for those that are living and paying those utility bills, because you've got to, when it comes to the affordability of the house that you're going to rent or the house that you're going to buy, it's also what is the cost of my sewer and water once I get in, and the property taxes. So those are important factors. So those are all part of how we try to, those are the parts that we can control. Managing that, we can't control inflation. We can't control the market of the value of your property. Those are other forces. We can't control what the state and federal government does, but we can control these things, and that's even in the enterprise funds. We can control what those costs are going to be. Here's an example again, that spurring that development, 2022. These are the number of units that are approved for development in developer agreements right now. And again, we anticipate and expect that going into 2024 also, and that's important. These are housing units. There's a high need for housing. We're going to do some other things. We're going to be, I mentioned earlier this year, and we're going to have, I'll mention it again, there's some things we can do with zoning. I want us to look at light touch density. I want us to do some upzoning by right. In fact, early next year, I want to get a joint session with the Planning Commission and the City Council to actually have a study session on that early next year, whether it's January or February. I want to be able to do that. Probably at a study session. You're going to be setting your study sessions at the retreat as to those topics. But I'd like to have that ability to get something into ordinance. Of course, that's going to have to go through a very public process. You're going to have to make that decision as the policy board for the city. But having an ability to do some upzoning. I had someone came to the meeting tonight. We had an individual who was just looking at increasing some areas in the area of bed and breakfasts. I mean, couldn't rent their facility, but maybe looking at converting for some short-term need. So a lot of those things we want to have on your agenda, especially when it comes to zoning. I think the presentation you've seen from Toby Peter last year on light touch density, and it's taken a while to move forward, but we've got a model, and we want to bring that model to you and hopefully be able to move that forward to, well, again, something we can control to help with that piece, including what we're trying to do downtown. Stormwater rate increase, again, this is the part where I talked about. This is where some of the things, stormwater is a utility in what we do, and we do these projects. Oftentimes, the other fees are subsidizing stormwater, so we really have to get at a point where, I mean, certainly we're not solving that issue here, but there is an importance in stormwater. It's important to everybody. It's important to the drinking water you have. It's important to the natural resource we have. So these are important utility. It's small. But it's something that's important that we focus on that. And this is a piece not only from development, but it also, again, is a minimal increase to help with that cost, and so that we're not necessarily subsidizing some of the development in the area of water and sewer. Parking system, no change. Again, I talked as far as the fee structure. You're, I think, very well aware of the system downtown, and what those cars in the pilot project, I know is going well. We're starting to get revenue back into the ramps. We're starting to get revenue, and a lot of things happening downtown. Of course, the downtown task force is working. Of course, we also have a legislative initiative that we have at the legislature, and hopefully will be fruitful going forward with really putting a significant emphasis on downtown. Just in comparison, I think it's important when we compare, I try to do this in all of the budgets so you get a little idea. This, when it comes to our parking system downtown, Again, we're among the lowest for regional centers our size when it comes to parking, and pretty low, even more so when it comes to the ramps. Some of the contract monthly permits that we have, and we're seeing an increase in that in utilization. We're also seeing an increase in utilization of the meters. Nice thing about having the app, which hopefully folks are using, we can actually track and watch the usage at different times of the day and when people are utilizing those. Refuse fees. This is a pass-by fee that we're proposing in this. You're going to see, this is the budget piece that you have in front of you. You're going to see the ordinance part that Ms. Hodel will go over separate from the budget. It's the funding piece, obviously, for some of these enterprise funds, but that'll come after this is the budget that I'm presenting tonight. But there is an increase in that pass-by fee, compost fee, and the yard waste bag fee that's in there. And for the pass-by fee, this hasn't been increased since 2009. But if you look at that top line, that's where it is. And again, we don't raise these fees just to build up reserves and raise them to just raise them. We raise them when there's a need, especially when we look at those trends where there is going to be a need. Of course, if you look at that second line in there, that oranges colored one, that is the city refuse tipping costs. You see those tipping costs have gone up significantly in the last few years. And that bottom green line, if you go back all the way to 2013, if you look at the recycling processing costs, we used to actually get money for recycling, and now we actually pay. Back in 2013, it was just over $22,000. Because we were offsetting it with dollars we actually received from recycling. If you look at 2024, it's over $264,000. That is a significant jump in the cost of recycling, and that is what is why we are looking at increasing that pass-by by a small amount. You're looking at it going up $2 in 2024. But it hasn't been raised in 2009. But again, we didn't see those increases until recently, so now we're making sure that we're staying ahead of that by increasing that fee at this time. How we compare in refuse, we're still like we are in sewer and water and property tax. We try to keep that cost down. Again, this is a cost to a homeowner. It keeps people in their homes, but we have a very unique system, the bag system, which 70% of our users use. We have the option for the cart. In fact, we started that a number of years ago because we had people that wanted the cart. They come from a different area. They're used to the cart. So we have the cart, but we still use the bags, and the bags have been very popular, obviously, with 70% usage, but you have the cart. So when you look at these comparisons, a little challenging to compare because you have a lot of private holders or private contractors in some of these cities, so it's just not one or two. It might be two or three. In some cases, it's one. And some don't have the bag system. We have a combination. You have the option of utilizing either one of those. But we do have the cart listed on there, a 95-gallon cart that we have. We're comparable in that area, but comparable in the cart, but we do a lot of extra things, and I'll show you in the next chart what other cities may just charge for the cart through a private hauler, but don't have a lot of other pieces of it. But if you look at the bag service, that's lower than any other area, especially considering folks just have that cart options in some communities. But if you look at what you get in St. Cloud for that refuse, we're right there in the proposed St. Cloud, pretty much all of those things that you would not get, the special pickups, that's special pickup anytime that you want. You just call and add that special pickup in there. We collect mattresses. We charge a fee for that, but we did that. A lot of cities don't do that. There's the refuse, the yard waste collection. So there's a number of things that you get even at a lower rate than a lot of other communities would have for that refuse, again, whether it's the bag system or whether it's the cart system. And in this budget, that's why we're proposing, the only thing we're proposing in the actual refuse collection is that pass-by fee for the refuse piece anyway. But in the compost, that's an area that we're proposing a slight increase there too. If you go back, that hasn't been increased. It was a number of years back. If you can see that the line that's that orange line on the top, that's the usage, the number of permits sold, and then the compost permit fee is part of that. That goes back a number of years when that was was last raised, and it kept it pretty flat. We're keeping it. There's obviously some costs, and there's also something you get with our compost that you might not get in other places too. You get some of the best compost, I think, in the area by far, because we actually have people that monitor people coming in and out. A lot of places just let people open the gate and you come in, and so you mix garbage and pretty much everything else with the compost. We're very careful to make sure that it's very high quality, high grade compost that's available for anybody in the community to utilize and to take. And if you look at, again, where we are locally with the area, again, this is comparable. So we're not, we're in the area of compost, we're trying to keep within that range. Because some of our residents, in particular other areas, maybe living on the north side, northwest side, use Sartell. And there are some folks that live out of St. Cloud that use that too. So you have a in-city rate and an out-city rate to try to keep it comparable so it stays within that range. But very popular. And again, we have an attendant there 5 days a week. Again, the quality of the compost, the material meets MnDOT's grade specifications, so it's a high quality compost at that site. And then the yard bag, we are proposing an increase in that too, again, and that's just the yard base, the yard city processing costs. You've seen a kind of an increase and a spike there too. We keep that pretty flat because we didn't need to increase it during that period of time. But as we see that trend changing, we're proposing adding that quarter on a per bag basis for the yard bags. And with that, we've had a lot of input through the year, and of course, had an opportunity to have a council budget session back in November. And so this again is the budget. There's plenty of opportunity again throughout the year for a lot of that feedback. And then again, as I mentioned, the actual fees are not the budget that you're having. This is the expenditure piece, but when it comes to some of those fees, the developer fees, those actually go into the projects you're going to see when we do the development on that. But separately, Ms. Odell will talk about the ordinance change coming up here in a little bit. But that is the enterprise funds for 2024. Council President Gerger, I'll turn it back over to you for public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Kleisen.